Start with this little piece, which is from the Accidental Talmudist.
We like him.
Yeah, he's an interesting guy. He's one of the authors on, or I would say one of the people on Facebook that sometimes has interesting pieces. And this is from his blog site. Dave, you would pick up?
Okay. 1 minute a day with God can open many doors, but you must schedule it. We are now counting the days from Pesach, aka Passover, commemorating our redemption from slavery in Egypt, to Shavuot, commemorating our receiving the Torah at Mount Sinai. This 7-week period called Counting the Omer offers the ideal opportunity to begin discussing a question I am often asked on Facebook, namely, what is the relationship between Talmud and Kabbalah?
Which I think is an interesting, probably viable question, especially since we are in this 7-week period of counting the Omer. So, keep going.
Okay. First, we must understand that we are now in a time of mourning. It may seem strange that we are not waiting in joy for Shavuot. Indeed, we will end our mourning in Lag BaOmer, the 33rd day of this period, and then perk up considerably as the birthday of Torah in this world approaches. But first come these 33 days of mourning for a plague that happened some 2,000 years ago. They said Rabbi Akiva had 12,000 pairs of disciples, and all of them died at the same time because they did not treat each other with respect. Yevamot 62b.
Right, Yevamot is a tractate, and it's Daf 62b.
Rabbi Akiva, or Akiva ben Yosef, is known as Rosh LaChokamim, or the head of all sages. His teachings are absolutely integral to any understanding of rabbinic Judaism, and he influenced the nature and manner of the Talmud's compilation more than anyone. He is also a fascinating character. Perhaps the most interesting thing about the head of all sages is that he did not begin learning Torah until he was 40. Prior to that, he thought of Torah scholars as his enemies, whom he wished to bite like a donkey. Pesachim 49b.
And we actually just read that in our tractate Pesachim, I don't know, within the last couple of weeks, about how Rabbi Akiva, wait a second, he used to not like Torah scholars? So,
the dramatic redirection of Akiva's life can be attributed to his wife, Rachel. Before they fell in love, he was a hired shepherd and she was the boss daughter. She agreed to marry him only if he would cease being an Am Haaretz, or ignoramus, and learn the ways of Torah.
And again, we've also talked about that concept several times in the last couple of weeks.
There's hope for everyone.
There is hope, and I think that that's what he comes to teach us.
Well, you know, I really have, like so many other things, I have a very hard time with.
Which part?
First of all, the mourning for the 12,000 disciples that all died at the same time. And I don't understand how you can say a teacher who is the leader of that academy, who in essence controlled the students somewhat, such as the current Rebbe that I'm looking at, controls her students. And she does it very well by voice. And by looks. So then why would you give this person the title of
head of all the sages?
Yes.
Well, Rabbi Akiva not only, as you know, Diane pointed out, gives us hope, but he's also the one that we think of in the story of Pardes, where he was the one who ascended to the highest heavens and came and entered in peace, right? Out of all the great sages, he didn't go crazy, he didn't become a heretic, and he didn't die. So that was one great piece about him.
And he couldn't control the students.
Well, we're going to read about that.
Right, we're going to get further into that, because I think the whole thing about Rabbi Akiva is that he was grounded in the physical world as far as being practical. He was of the world, but he was able to rise through into higher consciousness and come back into it because he understands the world. He knows how to work. He knows what it means. He wasn't so skewed that he was only a scholarly spiritual seeker.
But he had 40 years of experience prior to starting to learn.
He was grounded. He was grounded in his body. He was grounded in the ways of man. He was grounded in reality.
And then he got married.
Because he could come back. He could come back. The other guys couldn't come back because they were so isolated.
Or for whatever reason.
Hitobedut. Is that how you pronounce it? Histobedut? Hitobedut. They were so isolated, they weren't able to come back.
I don't know that we have good information as to what was the situation, although I have to say the book that we read, As a Driven Leaf,
Gives an
gives
insight.
a lovely fictional account of why they were who they were.
Right.
So in terms of why the other three had difficulties, I guess we would have to know a lot more about them. But anyway, let's learn a little bit more about Rabbi Akiva. Mike, you're on. Her father.
I have another question.
Yes.
See, she's trying to control the students.
I'm endeavoring to move us forward. That is true.
She is leading the group, though.
Her father?
Okay, I'm counting the Omer.
Yes.
And we come up to the 49th day.
Yes.
So I'm assuming that on the 50th day,
Matan Torah, we receive
we
Torah.
receive Torah. Okay, so let's back up a little bit in the story here. We have our buddy Moses didn't quite make it to the top the first day that he went up there. Took him a few days, and then he had to spend some time up on the mountain with God. It all just didn't happen in one day. So, what day did they arrive? So how many days from being a slave to freedom? Okay, so so when you cross the Sea of Reeds, the Red Sea, or whatever one of those places you want to cross, till he got to Mount Sinai.
There are people who have opinions about how long it took, or have attempted to backtrack to determine how long it was between Exodus from Egypt and Moses on the mountain first time or second time. So there are books that tend to provide that kind of information if that's what you're looking for.
No, because if you take the second day of Passover as being on this side of the Sea of Reeds.
Well, but that although we are, quote, counting towards Shavuot, in reality, what we're actually at some level counting is the harvest. So we're counting the Omer, and at the end of it comes Shavuot.
Yeah, but
if you would have come to Tanakh class last couple of times, 2 times ago, we were discussing just that there is not enough information that we'll know that. Okay, it's very simple, and there is a lot of speculations in books, but there is no straight line.
So, can you move on to that paragraph there? I think her father.
Her father opposed the match so much that he disinherited her. And she lived in poverty for 12 years while Akiva studied. Upon returning to her, Akiva overheard an argument between Rahel and a neighbor, critical of his long absence. He also heard her reply, "If I had my wish, Akiva would stay for another 12 years at the academy." So back he went. No wonder they had a happy marriage. After 12 more years, he returned as the greatest rabbi in Israel with 12,000 pairs of students. So right, is that 24,000 students?
That is correct.
Hanging on his word. When a poor woman tried to make her way towards the famous sage, she was rebuffed. "Make way for her," he told them, "for my learning and yours are hers."
So in other words, he was talking, this is the quote of Akiva talking about his wife.
Mm-hmm.
She was trying to make her way towards him when he comes back to town with all these students, and they're trying to keep her or push her away. So
If Akiva is ahead of all sages, and these were his own 12,000 pair of students, how is it possible they behaved so badly that a plague was dispatched to wipe them all out? After all, murderers and thieves routinely live long lives. What exactly did these students do so wrong? The first sin is they did not treat a poor woman with respect. These students were so engrossed in the amassing knowledge of and the honor that attends such knowledge that they forgot to behave like true Torah scholars. They lost the qualities of humanity and courtesy. Humility, thank you. Which are essential to their profession. Very, very interesting.
Exactly. So this is kind of one of the pieces, or looking behind what we know to be the text. Why, and warming up to Lag BaOmer, which, anyway, Yehudi, would you like to pick up?
Ben Yohayada says they were arranged in pairs because Akiva sensed trouble brewing. He tried to avert tragedy by matching strong and weak, so proper respect would be paid, but the students only became more jealous of each other's accomplishments.
And this piece is, which is probably one of the reasons why we study Chavruta. We study in pairs, so that people learn Torah together. It's not just a singular endeavor, not just one person, but you have people, some who are strong, some people are not so strong, but they're coming together, learning Torah together. Go ahead.
And because their spiritual level was so elevated thanks to their teacher Akiva, their sin was punished quickly and completely.
So whenever someone is at a high spiritual level, that karma just is really quick. It's not something that pays off in the long run. Often it happens, quote, right away. So, keep going.
Thus, the great unbroken line of the oral teaching, first given to Moses at Sinai, was now held only by the aging Akiva. The word teetered on a precarious edge. Rabbi Yehuda Priro teaches that the death of a great sage atones for generation if the generation seizes the event to elevate their spirituality. In Akiva's time, 24,000 sages died. What did the generation do? What Jews have done, always done. They wrestled meaning from tragedy, changed their ways and moved forward. Rabbi Akiva began teaching again, and though his last students were only 5, they were men of great kindness as well as understanding, and it was through them that the oral teaching was saved.
So I don't know if you remember the story, but at one point when Akiva's teaching, there is 5 great sages he's teaching, and basically, in fact, I think there was some movie where he's teaching them, but it's at a time when Torah is not allowed to be taught. And so he's doing it under perhaps penalty of death, that he's still teaching these last great sages and then giving them smicha and allowing them to move on so that they can, so basically the generation is saved by having this oral tradition passed on.
This was also the period when Haftarah came into being.
Right.
Torah was
forbidden, so Haftarah was the thing that was learned, and they were matched with the Parsha.
Okay. One of those students, Rabbi Shimon ben Bar Yochai, is traditionally credited with originating teachings compiled in the Zohar, the foundation text of Kabbalah or Jewish mysticism. It would take many, many blogs to explain the meaning and history of Kabbalah, but it will suffice for now to say that there was always existed within Judaism a stream of mystical thought, dedicated to understanding the relationship between creator and created so that one may experience it. Such an understanding is necessarily incomplete and ephemeral, but it arises from deep and careful study of every aspect of the creation, including the most flawed and wonderful component, us, most wonderful.
So you would pick up there.
God is perfect, we are not. This everyone knows, but the Talmudists and the Kabbalists share a keen interest in the precise nature of our flaws, so that we may do the crucial work of tikkun olam, or repairing the brokenness of the world. That repair starts with the self.
And so that's why it's important to know our strengths and our weaknesses so that we know where we're at. Because all of us have weaknesses, and some of us we try not to look at them too much. but by learning, where we're at in the world and what we enjoy, what we dislike, what we're good at, what we're not so good at, in some way is tikkun olam, because it starts internally.
The way Jews take meaning from tragedy is to make themselves better people. Akiva made himself a better teacher. His student, Shimon Bar Yochai, and his spiritual progeny, the Kabbalists, developed a system for mapping the creation based on 10 emanations of the Creator's will. These emanations, or Sephirot, are defined by and can be understood through our intellectual and emotional capacities because we are created in God's image. Sephirot literally means enumerations, the same word used for counting the days between Pesach and Shavuot. In the realm of the infinite, God is undifferentiated, unchanging, and perfect, i.e., one. To create a place for us and to enable us to have free will, God carved out a space within the one that is not perfect. This place is necessarily broken because it cannot contain the infinite light that shines around it. But we can let that light flow through us if we try, and that is what counting the Omer is all about. During this period, we engage in a practice of reflection upon the emanations of God as we experience them in our own personalities and try to rectify the flaws which prevent God's light from flowing through us as it desires to flow. For a good primer on the daily meditations one can use to engage in the work of repairing one's flaws, visit the Chabad website.
And we also have used additional tools, for example, the Rabbi Jacobson one that indicates a meaningful life. Okay. Mike, you want to pick up there?
Yes. Hello? No. Come on, pick up.
That was good.
Charge.
Talmud and Kabbalah thus work hand in hand. And the greatest thinkers in Jewish history all studied both examples. In the last 1,000 years include Rambam
and Ramban. Okay, so that right there's those two, and since they're so closely sounding like each other, when we actually say their names, the accent for Rambam or Maimonides is on the first syllable, and for Ramban is on the second syllable. So when people are speaking, it's Ramban and Ramban.
Maimonides and Nachmanides.
That is correct.
And who's Maharal?
We could go look up all of these. Maharal is Judah Low of Prague, and Arizal, 1500s spot. So, Judah Low of Prague, okay.
And of course, the Baal Shem Tov, founder of Hasidism, and the Vilna Gaon, the principal opponent of Hasidism. Interesting. One of my favorite thinkers is the Baal Shem Tov's great-grandson, Reb Nachman of Breslov. And I will leave you with one of his teachings, a teaching which is especially appropriate, why we are counting the Yomer.
Reb Nachman taught that we must spend some quiet time every day talking to God. Not as some insect would talk to a giant king in the sky, but as you would talk to your own true friend. Rabbi Mordecai Findley taught me to start with just 60 seconds a day, but to do it every day. You must schedule it. I have an alarm on my phone that goes off, which sounds like a good plan, every afternoon. My computer is also set for a backup at that hour, so I have to stop. If you try this practice, you'll find three things. I find it's very enjoyable to have a little cessation every day you can count on, like a mini Shabbos. It's very enjoyable to chat with God because God is an excellent listener. And every question you ask during this time will give rise to a truth you already know, but didn't stop to heed. What do I do wrong? How do I do it? Why do I do it? What can I do about it? How will I start to improve? What can I do right now? What shall I do after that? All of these questions have answers that will arise during your daily chat with God if you schedule it. As you become aware of those answers, you will naturally modify your behavior towards a good balance of understanding and kindness, like the latter students or Rabbi Akiva. Amazingly, Shimon Bar Yochai died on the anniversary of the day which ended the plague that killed the 24,000, or this year, May 10th, is its anniversary, Lag BaOmer. It's customary to celebrate his yahrzeit with great rejoicing as we turn the mourning from the first part of the Omer into the joyous expectation of the last part. May we all merit to grow in both understanding and kindness this Omer season, and may we all drink wisdom from the interconnected streams of Talmud and Kabbalah. This year, Lag BaOmer is May 10th, and we celebrate together with Temple Emmanuel, at a dairy potluck, and a movie. So what time is that going to be at?
I wrote an email to Harry to put 6:30 as the beginning in
Okay.
email, but if you, we didn't send out the email yet, so if you think it's better 6 or 7, just,
What
6:30 sounds great.
What movie you gonna show?
Shrudim.
and as there's some,
What's that about?
Shrudim is it's a little story about modern Orthodox. It's a sitcom with
you
American
were there,
English
no?
subtitles. I think you were there. You saw one of the it was at Emmanuel before.
Yeah, okay.
So this is another continuing
Okay, all right.
on the
I-
saga of.
Diane put the,
Yeah. well,
I have two
That's
seasons.
okay.
I have 2 seasons, season 1 and season 2. So whichever one you want to play, we can do it. I just figured out how to connect my laptop to the TV, but I'm not getting sound.
If you
It's
want,
not giving me an option for sound.
So somehow we'll figure that out between now and May 10th. And this,
I
the
will
gentleman
ask
who
John
does the
Gerson.
accidental Talmudist, I don't know if you guys have
Well, it
watched.
might be the cable. Excuse me, I'm sorry.
It's okay. If you guys have not yet watched When Do We Eat, he is the author and director of this Passover comedy, When Do We Eat.
I actually
Yeah.
rented that, but then I bought it this Passover.
Great, kind of,
that's another.
brings in a lot of different
It's
people.
it's a movie. It's a movie about this guy whose kid slips him some ecstasy, and so the whole Passover has all these different dynamics of individuals at the
Yeah.
table.
Would you like to?
no, excuse me. If you wanna do another movie, I have a good movie for you can borrow. It's a good year for it too, because this is still the 150th anniversary of the Civil War. So I have a movie called The Jewish Soldiers of the Blue and Gray.
Jewish Soldiers of the Blue and Gray. I haven't heard that one before.
Yeah.
Interesting.
It runs about an hour and a half.
I'm sure John Gerson personally would be interested because he
Well, that's true, yeah.
Yeah,
So
so if
also-
you wanna do that, I'm happy to look up.
Did you write in the email that name of this thing?
Mhm. We're gonna go outside for a week.
This,
It's like taking a break.
what about
Don't trip on
Meron?
any wires, okay?
What Meron? What about Meron exhibits such a strong eye?
You're bad.
magnetic
He is a
pull
bad
in
boy.
the world. So this is a little piece, Lag BaOmer's coming up, and this is just a little piece that
I'm gonna have a cookie.
comes from it.
Ginger snaps, huh?
That's true. So, what page are we on?
I don't know. I have so many dog-eared pages. I don't know anymore.
159.
159 at the bottom?
One-
Do you want to pick up there? So we're back to actually talking about
Oh,
Passover again.
Rabbi
Right before that,
Eliezer.
we dealt with Rabbi Akiva. So, back to the story about Passover.
Oh, and just as before we get there, my laptop puts out great sound, but the sound should be coming from the TV itself. And
So
I'm
maybe we
connecting
can
with.
talk about that after we finish
Yeah.
speaking.
Okay.
Okay. I have another technical question deeper afterwards. Okay. This is like which
In the bold at the bottom, on
Speak to the
159.
whole community of Israel and say that on the 10th of this month, each of them shall take a lamb to a family, a lamb to a household, and shall keep watch over it until the 14th day of this month. And all the assembled congregation of the Israelites shall slaughter it at twilight.
Okay, so that's quote out of Exodus. And then a little piece that's going to give us a hint of what's coming, a little foreshadowing here.
Rabbinic Judaism has few absolutes. More often it's a case of balancing one obligation against another. The Passover lamb must be slaughtered on 14th of Nisan and eaten the same night, the 15th. Only the daily and Shabbat sacrifice in the temple may be slaughtered on the Sabbath. what happens then in 14 Nissan's for this Sabbath? Forum criticism and historical evidence suggests that the story of Hillel is not earlier than the 2nd century and may have been subsequently revised. The Amoraim removed it to fit their own understanding of the halachic principles involved.
Okay, so that's a little foreshadowing of what we're going to deal with. In specific, we're going to deal with how to carry a knife.
What page are we on?
We're on page 160, chapter 6 at the Mishnah.
Okay.
So, slaughtering, carrying, cooking, washing, what can be done on Shabbos, what can't. Diane, you want to pick up Mishnah?
Okay. These aspects of the Passover sacrifice override the Sabbath. It may be slaughtered, its blood may be sprinkled on the altar, its inner parts may be cleaned and its fats burnt, but it may not be roasted, nor may its inner parts be rinsed on the Sabbath. Carrying it on your shoulder or bringing it from beyond the Sabbath boundary or cutting off scabs do not override the Sabbath. Rabbi Eliezer says, Eliezer, they spelled it different, didn't they?
No, it's the same.
They do override the Sabbath, okay.
Okay, so, yes,
No,
what
it is
can you
spelled
do
different.
on Shabbat, what can't you do on Shabbat? So, Mike, you want to pick up Gemara?
It's Elazar, it's different name.
Okay.
Gemara, the rabbis taught this law eluded the B'nai
Batria, a family of sages, possibly from Batria.
Thank you. On one occasion, the 14th of Nisan fell on Shabbat. They had forgotten the law and did not know whether or not it overrode the Sabbath. They said, does anyone know whether or not the slaughter of a Passover lamb overrides Sabbath? Someone said to them, a man called Hillel, the Babylonian, came up from Babylon. He attended the two great scholars of the generation,
Shemaiah and Avtalion.
Good thing I didn't live there. I wouldn't have been able to talk to anybody.
You could have found a nickname.
He said, who knows
He knows whether.
he knows whether or not the Passover overrides his Shabbat, Sabbath. They sent him an invitation and asked, do you know whether or not Passover overrides the Sabbath? He responded, is there only one Passover in a year? Surely we have more than 200 a year that override the Sabbath.
So what was he actually referring to? He means that there were more than 200 sacrifices, like the daily sacrifice, offered in the temple. So that's what his allusion was to in his comment.
Okay.
And
Thank you
said-
for reading the footnote.
And they said,
And they said, on what scriptural text do you base this? He replied, the expression in its appointed season is used in connection with the Passover. And in its appointed season, it is used also of the daily sacrifice. Just as in its appointed season indicates the slaughter of the daily sacrifice overrides the Sabbath prohibitions. So on its appointed season, when used in connection with the Passover, it overrides the Sabbath. Moreover, there is
it overrides the Sabbath
Right.
prohibition. So basically what they're saying is in either case, it's overriding Shabbat. So Passover is overriding Shabbat, and now they're going to make another argument, which is Kal v'chomer, or if one's into philosophy, it's a fortiori argument.
if the daily sacrifice, neglect of which does not incur the penalty of karate, overrides the Sabbath prohibitions, how much more should the Passover, neglect of which does incur the penalty of karate, overrides the Sabbath prohibition?
Okay, so they're just making a lighter to heavy or kal v'chomer argument. So as a result of this wonderful expounding,
You see, they immediately asked him to take the chair and appointed him president. Gee, it's easy. As long as and all day long he expounded the laws of Passover. He then began to criticize him and said, "Whose fault is it that I should have come from Babylon to preside over you?
ouch, and he's not being very nice here.
Is it your laziness? For you did not serve the two great scholars of the generation."
Shemaiah and Avtaliah. So he's, saying that because of his service to these great sages, he learned a lot, and he's suggesting that they should have done more to learn more. So,
The question is, what's karet?
karet is
Yeah.
being cut off.
Oh,
So being cut off at the hands of heaven and typically implies some kind of a death penalty in the long run. Sort of.
He replied, "I did not hear the law."
Wait, I think we missed
Oh,
one.
yeah.
They asked,
"Sir, if someone forgot to bring a knife to the slaughter of the lamb prior to Shabbat, what should he do?"
okay, and
The
the
49.
footnote there says he wouldn't be permitted to carry the knife in the public domain on Shabbat. So how are you going to do a slaughter of a lamb if you don't have a knife?
Levitation.
That might be carrying if you were somehow concentrating on it. Even if it wasn't in your pocket, you're still somehow carrying it.
It's interesting that some people don't like to bring the knife to the table for cutting challah.
That's actually a different story. The
Oh,
reason
it's
for
different.
that is not carrying, because you're not in the public
Yeah.
domain.
Oh,
The reason for that is that we don't use instruments of war
on Shabbat.
on Shabbat,
Okay.
unless of course they're ready to kill us.
So,
Generally speaking, that's why we don't cut a challah. We actually, instead, our minhag is to pull it apart.
so if someone makes a knife strictly for cutting Shabbat, for cutting
The
challah,
challah,
and it says Shabbat,
l'kavod
challah,
Shabbat, right.
right, then that wouldn't be a knife for war, made for war.
An interesting story, even though you have something written on it, a knife is typically deemed a weapon of war. I hear you, but generally speaking, this is why the custom.
Okay.
Okay, so back to how about you forget the knife, you want to go like slaughter the lamb. How do you deal with this situation?
Let's see, he replied, "I didn't hear the law."
I did, he did hear.
Excuse me, I did hear the law on that point, but I have forgotten it. But leave it to Israel. If there are no prophets, they are the children of prophets.
So when he's saying he's clipping a biblical verse, which often these sages did, and people glean from it what they glean from it. So even though maybe I don't remember it, leave it to Israel. If they're not prophets, they're children of prophets. So basically, the kahal is pretty smart, and they'll figure it out. So here we have, the following day, those who brought lambs stuck the knife in the lamb's fleece. And those who brought goats put it between their horns. So what were they doing? They were having the animal carry it, right? They weren't carrying it. The animals were carrying it, right? So,
That's a way to get around it.
so when he saw what they did, he remembered the law and said, "This is just what I was told by Shemaiah and Avtaliah." A teacher commented the expression, "in its appointed season." So now we're back to this comment, and we're going to pull that apart a little bit more. "In its appointed season" is used in connection with the Passover, and "in its appointed season" is also used with the daily sacrifice. Just as "in its appointed season" indicates that slaughtering the daily sacrifice overrides the Sabbath prohibition, so "in its appointed season," when used in connection with the Passover, indicates it overrides the Sabbath prohibitions. But how do we know that the daily sacrifice itself was offered on the Sabbath? If you say it is based on the expression "in its appointed season," this is written of the Passover too, so why cite the daily sacrifice? In fact, it is not the expression "in its appointed season" on which the inference is based, but the verse a burnt offering every Sabbath, as well as the daily burnt offering and its libation, which implies that that daily sacrifice is offered on the Sabbath too. A teacher commented, moreover, there is an a fortiori argument, or again, a kal v'chomer. If the daily sacrifice, neglect of which does not incur the penalty of karet, death at the hands of heaven, overrides the Sabbath prohibitions, how much more so should the Passover, neglect of which does incur the penalty of karet, override Sabbath prohibitions? Okay, so this is that argument kal v'chomer. All right. But this is open to an objection. The daily sacrifice is both more frequent than the Passover and entirely consumed on the altar. So, the other side of the argument, one cannot make a kal v'chomer argument for the Passover, since the Passover is more lenient in these respects. They answered. Hillel first gave them the kal v'chomer argument, but they rejected it. So then he argued using a different way, a different method. He argued by analogy. Then, if he could produce a valid text-based analogy, why did he offer the kal v'chomer argument first? He was arguing in a different fashion. As if to say, you may not have learned the analogy, you may not have derived or devised a text-based analogy on your own initiative, but you may argue from minor to major on your own initiative, therefore do so. However, they refuted his argument and he was thrown back on the analogy. So, he's using another method, another teaching technique to kind of explain to them why Passover in their time overrides Shabbat. The teacher commented.
I'm sorry. It's interesting because they kept referring to, back earlier, everything in its season.
So that was the first text-based argument. And right. He's using it based upon what he learned from the sages he learned from.
Okay, so then anytime you would use the Shehecheyanu, you had the season.
The Shehecheyanu
is for really something new.
Is really our blessing for
to bring us to this season.
This time in this season, which is different than in its appointed season. Okay. Bringing to this time in this season, as opposed to in its appointed time. Okay, the teacher commented, so we're back on 163. The following day, those who brought lambs stuck the knife in the lamb's fleece, and those who brought goats put it between their horns in order to kill. But surely this is making use of consecrated animals. Okay, so this is a different prohibition. How is this possible? Are they allowed to do this and have, quote, consecrated animals carried or not? No, they acted in accordance with what the known view of Hillel, for it was taught. They say of Hillel that in his day no one committed sacrilege with a burnt offering. Since they brought the animals to the temple courtyard unconsecrated, and only then consecrated them, they laid their hands on them and slaughtered them. Okay, so it wasn't making use of a consecrated animal because why?
Because the animal wasn't consecrated.
Until it actually made it to the temple. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's this argument. So how could they consecrate the Passover lamb on the Sabbath? Oops. Yeah, what? Another problem, right? Can you consecrate an animal on the Sabbath? Does not a Mishnah rule, you may not consecrate, assess, devote or separate truma and tithes. This is on festivals, and even more so on the Sabbath. So this comes from a Mishnah by itself, different place and time. This applies only to obligatory offerings that have no fixed time, but obligatory offerings that have a fixed time may be consecrated on the Sabbath, if that is their fixed time. As Rabbi Yochanan said, a man may consecrate his Passover lamb on the Sabbath and his festival offering on the festival, but isn't getting the lamb to carry the knife in its place a form of driving a laden animal, which is also forbidden on the Sabbath. Okay, so you see they're pulling apart all the different issues about getting this knife to the courtyard of the temple. Okay, so are you driving a laden animal? Yes, but it is an abnormal way of driving. Okay, so this is our loophole issue. Often when you do something on Shabbos, and you want to do it, but literally you're not allowed to do it because of whatever halachic issue, if you do it in an abnormal way, it's not like you're really doing it. This is our legal loophole to be able to do things on Shabbat that normally you wouldn't be doing. So, even if it is an abnormal way of driving, and so it's not forbidden under Torah law. Surely it's forbidden by the rabbis, though. That is precisely the question that the B'nai Patria put to Hillel. If the Torah doesn't actually forbid something, but the rabbis forbid it as a fence around a fence or protective measure, may it nevertheless be done in an abnormal way in order to fulfill a mitzvah? It is in answer to this question that he responded, leave it to Israel. If they are not prophets, they are children of prophets. So Hillel is criticizing B'nai Patria for their laziness. Had a problem when he was saying this. Yehudi, you want to pick up there and see what the problem was?
He gave way to uncharacteristic anger and pride. This is the thing now addressed.
Okay, so do you remember back when he criticizes this group, they've asked him a question. And what does he do with that question? How does he move towards them with the question? Wait, you guys, you should have known this. You were lazy. You didn't study Torah. Oops. Okay. Must have taught him better than that.
So they just, is it in the Talmud itself, it jumps from issue of precise way of sacrificing to
the precise way of how to carry this knife, how do you get it there, and under what circumstances, and which is more important? Is it Passover? Is it the Sabbath? Are you driving a laden animal? Or since it's an abnormal way of carrying, is it forbidden by Torah law? Is it forbidden by rabbinic law? Or is this the way that you're supposed to do it? So ultimately, we're left essentially with, this is the way you get this sheep or this goat to go. You consecrate them when you get to the temple. They carry their own knife, then you're not carrying. So now we're moving to a different issue about Hillel. When he says to these sages, you're lazy, you should have known.
Okay, so now it's an issue of lazy, of uncharacteristic anger and pride. Okay. Rabbi Akiva said in the name of Ra, whoever is proud, if he is a wise man, his wisdom departs from him. If he is a prophet, prophecy departs from him. If he is a wise man, his wisdom departs from him. This we see from Hillel, as the teacher said. He then began to criticize them, and then he replied, I did hear the law, but I have forgotten it. If he is a prophet, prophecy departs from him. This we see from Deborah, for it's written.
Okay, wait, so do you catch what the problem is? What's the problem here?
His memory went blank on him after he expressed his anger.
So this emotional state caused him to lose his intellectual faculties. That's what the dilemma is, and especially with anger. Anger is one of the ones that we'll see throughout Talmud and even rabbinic works later that say, if you're angry, you've lost the ability to actually hold conversation.
Better known in English as a senior moment.
A senior moment, based upon a cause from emotional outburst, right? Okay. So, Deborah.
Deliverance ceased in Israel till Deborah arose, till I arose a mother in Israel. And after that it is written, awake, awake, Deborah, awake, awake, begin the song.
Okay, so now they're looking for other places where this has occurred, and they're going back to the situation about Deborah.
It's Uri, Deborah, this was part of my story.
Ah, sweet. So, and you can see this piece here in the footnotes.
Oh, Deborah is trying to recover her prophetic power.
So Uri is that, awake, is the situation where she's trying to regain what she had lost after she made this comment about, I'm the one that, whatever happened.
There's also the song, the music. There's who's singing this wonderful song of that.
Sweet.
I can't think of who.
But they're using it here as a proof text. So go ahead.
Resh Lakish said, when a man becomes angry, Even if he is a wise man, his wisdom departs from him. If he is a prophet, prophecy departs from him. If he is a wise man, his wisdom departs from him. This we see from Moses, where it's written. Moses became angry with the commanders of the army, etc. in Numbers. And then Eleazar, the priest, said to the troops who had taken part in the fighting, "This is the ritual law that the Lord has enjoined upon Moses, from which it appears that the Lord eludes Moses," 53. Otherwise, he would have announced it himself. If he is a prophet, prophecy departs from him. This we see from Elisha, for it's written, were it not that I respect King Jehoshaphat of Judah, I wouldn't look at you or notice you. And then, now then, get me a musician. As the musician played, the hand of the Lord came upon him, etc.
Okay, so this is the problem with Elisha. So what happens? The footnote 54.
This is Elisha who had lost his prophetic power and only regained it when the musicians played.
Okay, so we also know that people who've got this difficulty with spirit, that often, the music is that which tones and seems to help it to recover itself. Diane, you want to pick up Rav Mani?
Rav Mani Bar Patish said, when a man loses his temper, he is brought low, even if heaven has already allotted him greatness. We know this from Eliab, for it is written, is that how you say it, Eliab? Eliab became angry with David and said, why did you come down here, and with whom did you leave these few sheep in the wilderness? I know your impudence and your impertinence. You came down to watch the fighting. Eliab, it is written, but the Lord said to Samuel, pay no attention to his appearance or his stature, for I have rejected him, which implies that until then he had loved him.
Okay, so that's kind of a sort of harsh sort of piece on that. But they're drawing those two together to say that his comments to David were, even if they might have been true, the actual, David, you are impudent and impertinent and this, that, and the other, this anger was not, I guess in God's mind, allowed. It was not permitted because they're using this as their proof text, because they're saying that God then rejected. So the temper bringing those great, the pride bringing those who are haughty low, often within Jewish tradition, it's a huge theme that we have. Perhaps, I don't even know if other religions have the same kind of ethical undergirding, but humility is one of our greatest and most important midot, one of our most important attributes that we try to imbue and hold as one of our highest ideals. So, Mike, you want to pick up the italics there, and then we're going to move into...
The Passover lamb was offered in the temple that is presented to God prior to being eaten at home. The party who were to share it had to be designated in advance.
Okay, so we had to know who all was coming to the feast, like how many lambs do you need and how many lamb parts, but yeah.
Guess who's coming there? It might happen, for instance, when a married woman, that she had been counted in to two parties, that of her new family and that into which she was born. Since an individual cannot be a member of more than one party with,
It should be probably with whom does she celebrate.
With which does she celebrate, either way. The Gemara describes
The felicity
of the bride who is equally happy in her in-laws' home and her father's house.
Okay, so...
Nice. What an argument to go through.
All true. All right.
Just have one start early, one start late, and hit both.
I guess, and what a great thing that we've got more than one place to party at, right? Do you want to do the Mishnah?
Sure. It's chapter 8. When a woman is living in her husband's home, if both her husband and her father slaughter a lamb on her behalf, she partakes of her husband's.
Okay, so you can see how this might be an important thing to know, right? Who's coming to the festival? Keep
Yes.
going?
Yes, and are you going to insult your mom?
Yes,
Or your
exactly.
mother-in-law?
So there better be like wall written down so you don't offend someone.
Right.
Now we know whose house you go to.
If she goes to her father's house on the first festival following her marriage, and both her husband and her father slaughtered a lamb on her behalf, she may partake of whichever she wishes. If guardians slaughter on behalf of an orphan, he may eat where he wishes. A slave of two partners may not eat the Passover lamb of either.
Unless someone offends someone.
Someone who is half slave and half freeman may not eat his master's Passover lamb.
Okay, and under that circumstance, the footnote says this is a classic illustration of an untenable personal situation, at least according to Gittin, which is another tractate. All right, in the Gemara, she may partake of whichever she wishes. This implies that the Bavera operates retrospectively, making her choice the valid one. No, not necessarily. Perhaps whichever she wishes means whichever she wished at the time the lamb was slaughtered, so the choice is not retrospective. A Baraita contradicts the Mishnah's ruling. On the first festival following her marriage, the bride eats the Passover lamb with her father. After that, if she wishes, she eats with her father, or if she wishes, with her husband. Answer? There's no contradiction, right? Because that Baraita there implies two different things. So now we're going to have part of the Gemara is going to come to try to like bring those two together, try to understand how those two, which seemingly two divergent situations, can be resolved. So from this Baraita. Answer, there's no contradiction. The Baraita speaks of a case where she's keen to go. The Mishnah of a case where she's not keen. The former case is, as it is written, so I became in his eyes as one who finds favor, from Song of Songs. Rabbi Yochanan said, this is like a bride who's at ease in her in-laws' home and wishes to go to her father's house to tell her family how happy she is. As it is written, on that day, says the Lord, you will call me my spouse and no longer call me my master. On which Rabbi Yochanan commented, this is like a bride in her father-in-law's house, not like a bride in her father's house. And we have more similar kinds of situations. Song of Songs says, we have a little sister whose breasts are not yet formed. Rabbi Yochanan said, this refers to Elul, whose people were successful in learning, but not in teaching. According to 56, the Jews of Elul, or little sister of Babylon, learned Torah, but did not produce their own teachers. Another one, I am a wall, my breasts are like towers, from Song of Songs. Rabbi Yochanan says, I am a wall, refers to Torah. My breasts are like towers. This refers to sages who nurture Israel. Rava has a different interpretation. He says, I'm a wall. This refers to the congregation of Israel. My breasts are like towers. This refers to synagogues and houses of study that nourish Israel spiritually. Rav Zuta Bar Tovia said the name of Rav. What is the meaning of the verse? For our sons are like saplings, well tended in their youth. Our daughters are like cornerstones, trimmed to give shape to a palace, from Psalms. For our sons are like saplings, well tended in their youth. These are the young men of Israel, who have not tasted sin. Our daughters are like cornerstones, trimmed to give shape to a palace. These are like the virgins of Israel, who preserve their virginity for their husbands. As it says, they shall be filled as a bowl, as the cornerstones of the altar. According to this, the footnote, the virgins are filled with desire for their husbands. Thank you, Rashi, who says they've been kept away from other men. Alternatively, as it says, our storehouses are full, supplying produce of all kinds, from Psalms. Like cornerstones trimmed to give shape to a palace. Scripture accounts to both young men and young women, virgins, as if the temple were to be rebuilt in their days. The prophet Hosea portrays the relationship of God and Israel as that of husband and wife. The background to the following interpretation is most likely the Christian claim that God had rejected Israel and counted sins. The response is not denial that Israel had sinned, but the affirmation that God's love overcomes sin. So this next little piece just shifts up a little bit. If you want to pick that up there.
The word of the Lord that came to Hosea, son of Beeri, in the reign of King Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah of Judah. 4 prophets prophesied in one period, and Hosea was the greatest of them, as it says, the beginning of God's word was Hosea. Now was 59. This is the original translation. JPS has written when the Lord first spoke to Hosea. Hoshea. Which one is it in Hebrew? Hoshea. Hoshea is in he spoke with, now was Hoshea the first one he spoke with? Sure, there remains prophets between Moses and Hoshea. Rabbi Yohanan said he was first among the prophets who prophesied at that time, namely Hoshea, Yeshayahu, Amos, and Micah. The Holy One, blessed be he, said to Hoshea, your children Israel have sinned. Hoshea should have replied, your children, your favorite one, the children of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, have mercy upon them. Not only did he not say that, but he said to him, Lord of the universe, all the world is yours.
All the world is
all
yours.
The world is yours. Change them for another nation. Oh, so this is the kind of
this is the explanation of what happens. Okay, so Israel sins.
Yes.
Do they get changed up for another one? And the Talmud says no. We still have the covenant, but yeah.
The Holy One, blessed be he, said, what can I do with a man? I shall say, go get yourself a whore for a wife and beget children of whoredom, and then I'll tell him, send her away. If he can send her away, then I can send Israel away. This is the instruction. Go get yourself a whore for a wife and beget children of whoredom.
Lovely text, right? Yes.
Yeah. This is this Hoshea.
Prophet. I
This
believe
is
he's the one who actually did have that particular issue with his wife.
Yeah. The text then says, so he went and married Gomer, the daughter of Diblaim. Rav said she was called Gomer because everybody translated it as her. Diblaim, she was bad news, the daughter of bad news.
She was bad news. Yeah.
So Shmuel said, Diblaim, everyone shrank of her like a babe. 60. The root GMR is to finish a gamar, to finish complete. Diblaim is incorrectly related to Diba, bad news, or bad report. Trample is a sexual euphemism. Diblaim is plural of develah, there.
Date.
A date.
Date.
Develah, date.
Develah.
Is it
Like
date?
it must be in Aramaic, is my guess, as opposed to tamar.
It's actually fruit, I suppose.
Not right, overall. But it may be, and I don't know, because a lot of this is obviously, by the time we've gotten out of Mishnah, you know, what part is in Aramaic, I don't know.
There's more than one word for tamar, because
there are different kinds of tamari.
Another line of interpretation, Gomer, Rabbi Judah said, because in her time the enemy sought to destroy Israel's possessions, Rabbi Yohanan said, they completely despoiled them, as it is said, for the king of Aram had decimated them and trampled them like the dust under his feet. She conceived and bore him a son, and the Lord instructed to name him Jezreel, for I will soon punish the house of Jehu for the bloody deeds of Jezreel and put an end to the monarchy of the house of Israel. She conceived again and bore a daughter, and he said to him, name her Lo Ruhaman, for I will no longer accept the house of Israel or pardon them. This is from Rahamim.
This is from Hoshea.
Lo Raham.
Oh, yes. Right, Raham. I have no mercy, in other words. Right.
She conceived and bore a son, then he said, name him Lo Ami, for you are not my people, and I will not be your God.
Okay, so these are the pieces that Christians pick up and say, okay, so look what it says here in this prophet about the people of Israel, so maybe that's why there's a new covenant or something. But the Talmud's going to come and say, no. But anyway, go ahead. When two, or actually, Diane, sorry, pick up when 2 sons and a daughter.
It's 101.
Okay.
Do you want to continue?
I was hoping to actually finish up Hosea's issue.
And how far does he go?
The end of the page.
Oh, okay.
There's more on the next, but
To the New
we're
Testament.
moving into a little
He
different.
goes farther than it goes to the New Testament.
When 2 sons and a daughter had been born to Hoshea, the Holy One, blessed be he, said to him, perhaps you should have learned from Moses, your master. When I spoke with him, he parted from his wife. Now you part from yours. Hoshea replied, Lord of the universe, I have children from her. I can't send her away or divorce her. The Holy One, blessed be he, retorted, if you, who have a harlot for a wife, and don't even know whether her children are yours or someone else's, can't bring yourself to part from her, how can you tell me to part from Israel, who are my children, the children of those I put to the test, the children of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, one of my 4 possessions in the world? Of God's possessions is the Torah. One of God's possessions is the Torah, as it is written. The Lord took possession of me as the beginning of his way. One is heaven and earth, as it is written, God Most High. Who possesses heaven and earth? One is the holy temple, as it is written. The mountain his right hand had acquired, and one is Israel, as it is written, your people whom you possess. When Hoshea realized that he had sinned, he started to pray for mercy for himself. The Holy One, blessed be he, said, rather than implore for mercy for yourself, implore for mercy for Israel. Because of you, I have made 3 decrees against them.
So even though the prophet said something negative, as it often says, is whatever comes out of their mouth, God is going to follow at some level. And Hoshea had this particular issue. God's looking at that as a metaphor and saying, you didn't put away your wife. How can you expect me to put away Israel? So at the top of 170 then.
Hoshea then prayed for them and averted the harsh decrees. Not only that, but he began to bless them, saying, the number of the people of Israel shall be like that of the sands of the sea, which cannot be measured or counted. And instead of being told, you are not my people, they shall be called children of the living God. The people of Judah and the people of Israel shall assemble together. I will sow her in the land as my own, and take Lo Ruhamah back in favor, and I will say to Lo Ami, you are my people, and he will respond, you are my God.
Okay, so that we always just try to end on a positive note there. So we'll pick up at Rabbi Yochanan next week. Thank